back to another episode of Beekeeping Buddies. I'm Steven.
I'm Luke.
We're here to talk about all your beekeeping things. We start off talking about what we're doing around the yard. I think on the top of today's list, problems with small hive beetles, but they have slimed frames. It's gotten that bad.
Those that don't know what a slime frame looks like, it's gross, right? It's like the beetles themselves slime the frames. The bees won't work those frames basically anymore. And
I thought the slime was from the larvae.
I think it is. I think it's feces. So like maybe from the larvae. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it's from. It's gross. It smells bad. It has a distinct fermented smell to it as well.
Yeah, but I've only ever noticed it after you get little larvae, little maggots crawling around everywhere in the frames. Does it finally get slimy?
That's true.
Because you'll have the small hive beetles, the little black beetles running around in a hive without it being slimed.
That's true.
It's only when you start to see a high concentration of the larva, the small hive beetle larva, that you get the slime, what we call slime.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, this is nothing for those that are listening that are down south. This is not the issue that you guys see. We don't get that here in Illinois, in the Midwest. We get like maybe 100, right? Like that's a bad infestation. So 20 is, I start to worry and I do something about it.
So I can't say I saw a lot of small hive beetle so the one apiary was running horizontal, and they've had an issue with small hive beetle in the past and have slimed frames. And I think the space is more difficult for them to work as the horizontal. My experience with horizontals is admittedly pretty low. And this was the end farthest away from the working brood area.
And we talked about this a little bit. This is a modified. This isn't a standard Langstroth frames in this horizontal.
No, these are the horizontal.
The Dedant frames is what they used to call those deep ones.
They're deep. They're extra deep. Yep. And so these are the frames that had honey in them. You know, they were kind of at the far. This was a very large hive in the spring, and they had filled a lot of it with honey. And so this was and then for whatever reason, I think from high mite loads, Or
the swarm?
They swarmed or.
The population difference before and after a swarm is more significant than I think people get credit for.
Yeah. And so
especially if they don't requeen.
That population, they did not requeen.
Yeah.
And so that population really fell off and left a lot of honey that was unguarded. And that's the perfect recipe for the small hive beetles to move in and create problems. So, it's that time of year, as we get into late July and early August of when we're going to start dealing with other pests, and then shortly behind that, we had set some empty frames off into another box that wasn't being used. And they had it was just a little wax. It was just mostly undrawn plastic foundation. Wax moth decided to move into the piece of foam that was being used, that was stored at one end of the hive, and chewed out the foam and made little tunnels on all that and made pink foam dust everywhere. And then they were not real pleased about all that. I'm like, that's kind of what wax moth do.
Yeah, they go up and, they're useful in nature. They're kind of neat.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
There's just a problem for when you got equipment that, other equipment that
chew out the little sections in the frames. You can see those frames that have been left out.
And I certainly have some of those in my apiary.
Oh yeah, I actually use some of those. I just pop out the foundation and replace it with new wax foundation.
And for me, where I run mostly natural wax, I'll throw it through in the solar wax melter. That melts it off all the wires, and then I stick a new piece of wax foundation in there. So it's basically the same thing.
I actually did find a new use for some, because I had some that had been sitting in a hive that they had not used and had some funky wax on. And because I bought a wax melter specifically to get some of the scum gum separated from the hive, I have a new water heated wax melter for wax. So whatever. But for that, I'm dipping the frame in there. So I'm doing a test. I have 3 frames that I dipped to see how the girls, before they wouldn't touch them.
Yeah.
And so I have it in a new hive that's being fed. New hive. I have it in a hive that's being fed that needs to draw some. I'm going to see how they take to it. So maybe in a couple of weeks I'll be able to report on, it works great, or no, it's not going to work. We've had other beekeepers locally, right? That have talked about open feed, and like somebody brought a contraption in that was like a long trough feed, real shallow trough feed.
Yep.
And I've been setting out my wax cappings, and we get the wax cappings are pretty amazingly picked through.
Yeah.
And I thought, the Illinois River is up a little bit because of all the rain we had. So my flower forage down there, which is usually pretty strong this time of year, is kind of dropped off. And I thought, let's see how hungry they are. Let's see what an open feed will do, because usually they'll ignore most open feeds if there's other resources around. And so that was where it started. And I also had some little floater tool. They're made to float in 5-gallon buckets.
Yeah.
And I wanted to use them. I haven't used them. So you scruff up the inside of a 5-gallon bucket with some sandpaper that they provide, and then you put this floater in there.
And that just gives the sides of the inside of the bucket some more traction for the bees?
Yeah. And I was skeptical about that. So I actually had a 5-gallon bucket out there, nothing in it, because the girls are, and I put like a smudge of honey in there. That's enough for them to want to go check it out. Yeah. And they do fall down. They'll both slide down the side of that. And I had one that was scuffed, and the one that was scuffed, the honey was gone. There was no bees in there left. So I'm like, okay, well, that's enough.
So I've done this with the old chicken feeder. I've got chickens, so you get the
I have one of your chicken feeders I did this with.
and I put marbles in mine, and I probably did this in spring one year, and it got some attention. It didn't get a ton of attention. They drained it in a day or two, maybe, from open feeding. That was not what your experience was from the time lapse that you set up.
Yeah, I've got a picture. I've got a video, and I'll put it on our YouTube channel. I've got a video of a time lapse of beginning to start, and actually I did it twice. So the video is actually the second time I did it. So we've talked about the lids I use. I run the styrofoam lid that has a real deep.
It's like a 2-inch deep
lip to it.
Yeah,
and that'll hold.
I mentioned the video. This is one of his styrofoam lids flipped over.
Yeah,
and so it created like a 2-inch pond.
Has 1 gallon of feed in it, and they drink
1-to-1.
Yeah, 1-to-1. They drink, and then I usually just leave it with water.
Yeah.
So, and I'd emptied it out, and it has 1 gallon of 1-to-1 in it, and they went through 1 gallon the first time in 40 minutes. And I thought, maybe that's just like a morning thing. It's strange. Now, this is a distance from the apiary. This isn't sitting right in my apiary because I don't need to have all my bees fighting. Like, that would be
Yeah, this is like
chaos.
200 to 300 yards.
Yeah, 300 yards, I'd guess, from the apiary. And breaks line of sight. There's buildings in the way, things like that. So they went through it the first time, and I thought, okay, well, this might be neat to see in video. And I put it out there, and I put a 5-gallon bucket out there because it had so much attention before. I thought I'd separate some of the attention. And they actually did clear out the lid before they went to the bucket. But they cleared the second lid out, 1 gallon, in about 40 minutes as well. And then they cleared out a 5-gallon bucket same day.
So if you watch the video, there is a point in the video where you basically cannot see. It becomes very difficult to see or make out anything of the lid or the floating platform, because he's got one of the 5-gallon floating platforms in it also. And it is so covered with bees that all you see is sort of a mass of bees working the area that is the cover with the feed.
And what's interesting is that the number of bees that I found dead around the lid was almost zero.
Yeah.
Almost none. I think 1 or 2, and I couldn't tell you if those had been there before or not.
Yeah.
The bucket had about 40 total out of a 5-gallon bucket full of 1-to-1 that didn't make it. But the lid, nothing.
And so in your apiary right now, you also have weaker hives that you're actively feeding that need to have foundation drawn, or you're trying to help out, right?
I'm trying to get them up to weight for winter. That's how I look at it. I'm looking at they're livestock. They need to have the hive itself is the body mass of it, in their population is the body mass, and I need to get that up for winter. And people are like, well, it's hot outside, right? But you gotta do the bee math. You gotta look at the numbers and realize that your winter bees will start being born like within the next week, maybe 2 weeks. So those are gonna be your winter bees. So I need them fat and healthy. I will be moving supers around just to get the weights correct on all of the different hives. But you don't ever feed honey. Feeding honey doesn't actually grow or draw a hive. It just adds some weight to it. And I can feed, and also if you're listening, do not feed other people's honey to your bees, right? That's how diseases are spread. And I think we've got some stories about diseases we may talk about here. But that's how diseases are spread. And so don't do that. You can feed your own if you're real confident in that, but don't do somebody else's.
It just makes more economic sense to sell that honey product as a $10 or $15 a pound product, and then take 50 cents a pound white sugar and make that into 1-to-1.
Kroger sells a 25-pound bag of sugar for $17-ish, 16 something. I think that's the best price in our area for it. I looked at it, Sam's, the last time I was there, and I noticed I think it was up to about 60 cents a pound. Yeah. It had been hovering right around 50 cents a pound for probably since COVID. Yeah. Yeah, and I mix 125, for those that are wondering, I mix a 25-pound bag of sugar with 4 gallons of water. You can go to any brewing website, and they have buckets that are marked with like gallons, so that for brewing, so you just fill it up with the 4-gallon mark, and then dump the 25-pound bag in, and you're done.
This is giving me a right error.
That's not good. Pull the chip. Is that new, or is it like a brand new right error?
Here, you come look at it. It says it's recording and the numbers are running, but it says right error. Oh, now it went away. Huh. Here.
See the record light.
We should be recording, so
25-pound. So for those who are wondering, I mix a 25-pound bag of sugar with 4 gallons of water that I pick up from the bag. I pick up from Kroger. The water is just from a well. We have a well water, and the bucket is from a brewing company just online. Ohio Brewing Company, I believe, is where I bought theirs. And it has a little nozzle on there that you can turn. So if you're going to feed from the bucket, you feed from the bucket. If you're going to put it into little gallon containers, it fits. It pours nicely into those. That's what I would suggest for anybody.
And then you use a paint mixer?
I use a paint mixer, and then I usually
drill?
I use a heavy drill with a paint mixer on it, and then I usually let that sit. You can let it sit I'd let it sit for overnight before, but you can just let it sit for like an hour, and all that sugar will dissolve pretty easily.
So you think you're going to continue to do that several more times here, or was it just sort of an experiment because you had some feed left over? Or?
It was an experiment. I know that the open feeding can cause issues, right? If there is a high mite load for other hives nearby me within like a 2-mile radius, I'm feeding every hive within a 2-mile radius. I know almost every hive in a 2-mile radius. The only one that's not mine is a guy that doesn't treat. He believes that he doesn't. His bees don't survive, but he doesn't treat for mites and doesn't take mite counts, none of that stuff. So.
And whatever exists in the wild for bee trees.
Yeah, whatever exists in the wild for bee trees. In our area, I'd be surprised if there were a ton of them. I'm sure that there are a few because I had a large basketball-sized swarm just leave not too long ago. So I know that they're out there. So do I get... I'm sure I get other bees. I am treating for mites. I do treat for mites. And then I do a fall treatment for mites as well when they've all slowed down. So I do my best to keep those numbers low. And I do check my mite counts, right? So my mite count for my hives I was worried about, the highest one I got was 3 per 300.
So it'll be interesting if you get back in the hives this week, if you can notice, because you essentially put 40 pounds of sugar.
About 32 pounds of sugar into my apiary.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you double that with the water, right? Because it's 1-to-1.
Yep.
So you added 60-ish pounds across the apiary, which doesn't sound like a lot, but, I mean, when you figure...
It's a pound per hive.
Yeah.
Plus, the small hives have their own feeders in them that is a gallon.
So it'd be interesting to see if you can notice that in frames, if you're seeing any... Are you seeing any regular nectar being brought in this time of year? It's sort of toward the end of our flow. It's tapered off here.
Not very much.
Yeah.
Usually I get a whole bunch from the river.
Yeah.
Because there's this real invasive flower that's down there, silver sage or something like that. It's a Chinese ornamental that was brought in that spreads on the river, and the bees love it, and they'll hit all of that, and it is all underwater right now. Well, not underwater, but its feet's underwater, so they don't usually like to have their feet that wet. And I think that those are slowing down. I don't see the bees down there working it like they normally do.
We did talk about queens on our queen castles last week. It's been another 2 weeks. How are our queens doing in terms of being grown-up girls?
So there are some grown-up girls. We have a few things happened. I did I regrafted, right? One I regrafted.
Yep.
And those grafts took, I only did like 5 grafts.
Yeah.
5 or 6. Because I didn't really need to split out to have 20.
I think we talked about
queens.
having the intern take a hand at it, and
the interns didn't do so well.
Didn't do so well. But the point is,
but he got some experience
Yep.
doing it, right? And so the 5 or 6 that I did, one of them didn't make it, and then the other ones have. And I also was called for a tree cut down where I had to chainsaw out a 6-foot hive out of a tree because the tree guys won't touch it.
Yeah.
That's not an experience I think I want to repeat. It's not fun. And the person...
You don't have much of a saw. You've just got a battery-powered
Ryobi, battery-powered.
Yeah,
it chews through wood especially hollow trees.
Yeah.
But it is not the bar on it's not a real long bar.
Yeah.
I have access to one, right? Our family has a nice one. But this is a portable one, and I really didn't think I was going to do that much work, right? She said, we didn't know we even had bees in that tree. They can't have been there for very long. We never see bees in our yard.
You know how that goes.
And and this was a 6-foot-long hive that was 2 5-gallon buckets full of bees.
Yeah.
And so I spent all of 2 days out there with a chainsaw and a vacuuming them up and chainsawing bees.
So the intern got some experience doing some cut and strain, some squash and strain?
Yeah, he did all the squishing. I went out of my way to make sure that anything I hit with a chainsaw that would have had bar oil on it got put in a different bucket, got put in a waste bucket.
Yeah.
I should have taken a picture of it. It had rained, and so like part of the tree was hollow where the rain had settled. Yeah. And the honey was stuck in it, and this is not also honey that I didn't take, but like it was sitting down in there, and I'm like, this is how you get mead, right? Like it had rained, and then obviously there was another hive nearby because there were robbers there every day. So I vacuumed up as much as the hive as I could. I got to a section. I thought it was a knot in the tree. The bees were acting a little funny, like maybe there was something behind there the first day, and I was hoping that there wasn't. And the intern even said, hey, I think there's something behind this knot. And I was hoping the answer was no. And I just cut a little hole into there, just like a slit, a slit, and bees poured out of it. So I spent the second day
doing the second half.
Beyond that, yeah.
So how the queen castle's working out?
But the queen castle's working pretty good. So I used that queen. I used one of those queen cells into that hive. So now we've got a hive that is relatively strong, like because it's a bunch of bees in there. But the rest of the queen castles are working out well. I did have one abscond. I think the queen went out for a mating flight, didn't come back. Yeah. So absconded, and same castle, 2 sections over because I had an empty section in between. those guys are doing great. Found the queen in them. They're doing well.
What's the game plan for how we wrap up the season of queen castling?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because this will be new for us.
Yeah.
You just gonna throw everybody together, like find one that's still there, and then throw everybody together, or what?
I think I'm going to go through and find like mid-tier strugglers that are doing okay, but not
and need
great,
a little boost,
and then that need a boost, and I'll do like a newspaper combined with a queen castle that's doing well, because I have a couple of them are doing like one of them is 2 frames laid and a 3-framed thing. And that's a recipe for a swarm.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't really.
But I mean, I thought the whole plan was to be moving the queens out of there before it got to that point.
It is. I haven't had the demand for queens that we've had in past years.
So I mean, I guess you could just keep bumping them up, right? Just move the two frames to a 5, and then move a 5/5, and by then you got a deep, and you can just replace something that doesn't go well in August.
Yeah, you can. There's all kinds of paths that we can take with it. But the first year, I just wanted to see that you, like, sometimes you just got to see if you can do it. Can it happen? Now it can happen. Now what?
I know, right?
Good thing is that this is all my time, right? So I can do. I can organize stuff around this.
Yeah, you get the time to experiment and figure it out. Looks like in the news, the only thing we have is the upcoming Hiveorama show in St. Louis in a couple of weeks. I think Randy, 628 Dirt Rooster on YouTube, had a quick live the other day trying to plug it, try to drum up some support for it. It sounds like I'm going to be there. I think you're going to be on vacation.
I'm going to be actually, I have identified an apiary in Alaska that I'm going to go see.
Oh, of course you have.
and a blacksmith. There's a blacksmith up there too. If my parents are going, it's with us. And apiary and blacksmith in Alaska, and I'm going to go up and see those as part of a tour. So so my goal is, I've got one apiary that I've highlighted. I've reached out to him. I haven't got a response. I'm going to poke around and find as many on our trip as possible, and see what do they do. Like what do cold weather places do for honeybees?
You would think they still have some up there for pollination.
Low temp, yeah, it's supposed to be up there, and then low temperatures right now is in the 60s.
Yeah,
so they should be good. Right?
So I'll be heading down there for that August 10th. You should be able to hear about that between now and then if you're interested in attending. I believe it's $100.
It is $100, and you get a T-shirt and lunch.
You get a T-shirt and lunch out of the deal, as well as be able to. It's a pretty small event, so if you're looking to get some one-on-one time with some of bigger names in beekeeping, this is an excellent platform to make that happen. And
and it's one of those things where you just need to not be shy. They're sitting around a table in the back of the room waiting for their turn to talk. You just walk back there and talk to them.
Our next segment, we talk about what questions we get on our Honeybee Hotline. I think you've been doing a lot of outside classes, a lot of outside normal beekeeping circles.
Yeah. So it's one of my goals for Riverview Road Apiary, which is the one I run, is to get some extended education to the population. So it's not the things they don't know is bee sting. They make honey, and right, that's all they know. So that's not my goal. My goal is to have them actually have an experience. So my in-laws, they came down. So they came up from St. Louis, and they were in the area, and they're actually visiting my niece who lives in Bloomington. And so they came up for the class, and then I had 2 people come up for the class. And then my intern brought 4 of his friends for another day for a different class. So, so far the feedback is really positive. It's hard, sometimes I lose sight of that I've been working with bees for years now, and people are fascinated by them. And I'm like, oh, right. They are fascinating for people that don't. They're fascinating for me still, but the simple low-level stuff that I expect like everyone to kind of know, it's not well known, right? And so we go through through talking about bees. We're going through talking about their life cycle, how honey is processed, and then go out to the apiary, have people go through it, hold frames, point out queens. Especially that's the queen castles are great for because we only have 3 frames she could be on. So,
hopefully she's there.
So hopefully, like, and there are times that I'm like, yeah, I don't know. She's in here. We're going to go to a different queen castle.
Yeah.
and find her here. So like, we go through that. You get to see a queen. You get to see drones. You get to see eggs. You get to see some of the hive set up. You get pictures of everyone holding the frames. And I think I feel like it's a good time. But the feedback I'm getting is that it's a great time.
But you've also been doing some classes on Eventbrite, it sounds like.
And I've been those classes. That's how they schedule them. So I've been scheduling them through Eventbrite. And I thought when I first started using Eventbrite, I thought, I don't know how much traffic this actually gets. And I've had 2 people show up the last 3 weeks. 2 of them were from St. Louis.
And you've got a limit on these? Like, you don't want
I have
50 people showing up, right?
I have 10. 10 people, no more than 10. Because I don't want to deal with more than 10 people running around being crazy.
And right? you're selling this as...
It's a honey tasting and hive visiting. So it's AP tourism.
AP tourism, all right.
Yeah.
And then how many honeys do you currently have in your honey tasting?
So I do honey straws plus my cut comb, plus one of my honeys. So my honey straws, I have like 6. My cut comb would make it 7. And my honey is 8. 5 is really realistically like when you start getting overwhelmed. But the ones that I point out are stuff like, so I have a cinnamon honey that is a infused honey.
Yeah.
Right? So like, hey, this is infused honey. This is how you do this. This is why you do this. And so it's not my honey. I don't infuse my own honey because there's weird laws in Illinois against that require, right? So I have an infused honey. I have like lemon blossom honey, which is like lemonade. That stuff's great. Blackberry honey, which is also excellent. Orange blossom honey, because everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Buckwheat, because that's a real shocking surprise to the palate for those that haven't had buckwheat before. It's kind of like if bees could dream of coffee.
And if you have any of your hot honey?
I don't have any of my hot honey in there yet because it's not available for sale.
It was spicy.
It is spicy, and it is hot too, right? So we're Midwesterners. We don't handle heat real well for the most part.
Yeah, I guess.
And this is habanero. This is peach mango habanero.
Yeah.
This is going to be.
It's got some kick to it.
Yeah, this is going to.
I've had it. It's got some kick to it. It was good, but it
was. I mean, Dirt Rooster Randy tried it. He's a Southern boy.
Yeah.
And
he was talking about it on his live.
It was too much.
Yeah. So droning on, where we talk about what we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks between now and when we get together again, what might our listeners out there be focused on around their apiaries. I think it's this time of year is when you kind of get a break, right? Like there's not a lot going on. You've already taken your honey.
I don't.
And
I'm
kind of well, I mean, but if you haven't taken a ton of honey, then your hives might be sitting on 30 or 40 pounds already, in which case you're good, right?
I think we have a dearth in a lot of areas here. I think you just got to now go out and check your hives. If you're sitting on 30, 40 pounds honey, then you're good. That's fine. If you are sitting on empty hives, then you need to be considering feeding. And don't go and make. I gave a recipe for 5 gallons of sugar water. Don't go make 5 gallons of sugar water. That's silly. Go make 1 gallon at a time. It fits into the 1 gallon feeders. You can just make 1 gallon, split it between 2 feeders even, and that's plenty. Just see if they're taking it. And
I probably won't get serious about something to feed until probably late August, though.
Yeah, I usually don't. And I'm just trying to be proactive. Also, I'm going to be gone, right? I'm going to go see Alaska, and that'll be a week that's out of my schedule, and I don't want to get behind. I'd rather have them have a build up there. And goldenrod, you can keep our fingers crossed for goldenrod.
Yep.
But It sometimes
like
shows up,
blooming
and sometimes
summer flowers. Yeah,
it's hit and miss, right?
but the nice thing about having as many hives is you really do have a large number there that you can balance from in terms of pulling some from the stronger hives to balance out to the weaker ones.
Yeah, and that is the plan.
And if you don't have that, if you're just a regular beginner with just ones or twosies hive, it affords you to be able to get in them more often and watch them more often, but at the same time, you don't have the security blanket there that you can just go ahead and rob 20 pounds off of some other hive.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, that I think I'd stress is that it gets hot. Like we're in the dog days of summer, right? It gets hot, and people haven't been in their hives, and that's when you get in trouble. That's when you get, hey, I was just in my hive. When was that? A month ago?
Yeah.
And now my hive's queenless and they're dead, right? Like every 2 weeks.
This time of year, every 2 weeks. Spring, it's certainly every week. But I would say right now, this time of year, I haven't been in mine, but every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and every 2 weeks is that's a safe number,
right?
As long as you can get into your hive and recognize.
I still have
good, or we're not doing.
Yeah,
good.
and there's still enough time that if I have to move a frame of brood over for a queen or something because they haven't, they've swarmed on me or didn't notice, or they killed the queen that I, for whatever reason, it still gives me a little time to try to sort it out.
Yep.
by just doing regular beekeeping things.
Yeah, and there's still breeders, right? I just got a note from the Michigan Club. They've got queens. They've got queens that they can send you, right? So like, you still have time for picking up a queen and introducing it to the hive and still getting your winter
a batch of brood done before winter. Yep.
Yeah, getting your winter bees in place. So I wanted to cover, what do you do post slime?
Post slime, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I have not had a post slimage in my personal apiary. I have watched some video, and to be honest, the most effective video was they were pressure washing the frames down to the plastic foundation to reuse.
So I've dealt with post slime, and if I'm going to be totally honest, then I was so mad at the post slime because it was 100% my fault. I burned those frames. I got rid of them, and I said, I'm not dealing with this. This sucks. I burned them. However, I have heard that you can go out, freeze the frames, kill the larva, put them back out, let them be robbed, freeze them again because larva again.
Yeah.
And then you can reuse them.
So my advice that I'm giving the people that I've run into is I typically have them sitting in the sun.
Yes.
To kill off the larva. They do not like the sun. They do not temperature regulate well.
Right.
And that gives everybody else a chance to rob out whatever honey that the bees deem to be usable, which I feel like they're a better judge of that than I am. And so once they have robbed it out, then you could either freeze it or scrape it down to the foundation, or
by no means do not try to reuse. Do not try to eat it. It is.
I have not suggested that.
I tasted it. It is terrible. Like it's rotten.
Okay.
Fermented.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's real bad. I tasted it just to see. Right? I'm like, well, it's not good. So don't bother. But yeah, those are the ways that I would deal with it. We did have that question. I did want to cover it just to make sure that we covered that eventuality. Everyone's going to deal with it at some point, I think, in your beekeeping, right? That's one of those things that, like, it may happen. It probably will happen. What do I do?
I guess I know I definitely struggle with wax moth more than I do with small hive beetle.
Okay.
Which is it destroys the frame, right? It destroys all my drawn wax, and so you just I end up cutting it out, scraping it out. I have about 50-50 natural wax and plastic.
I feel like I run into that in spring. Like that's one where I'm going through, getting my hives ready, and I'm like, oops, I've got some destroyed wax moth frames.
The fall you know, after I have extracted, if I haven't set aside my extracted frames and winterize those frames well, which I guess could be something we talk about briefly. I know you, after you've extracted your frames, if you're not putting them back on wet, that was a question I had, is can I put them back on wet? And that absolutely you can.
Yep.
Especially if you're extracting deeps and you plan to use them as deeps as opposed to your honey supers.
Well, another thing that people don't realize that you put them back on wet and they're not going to so I have one hive that I put 3 on wet. They didn't want to use the top 2. They decided not to use the top 2. So they stripped all of that honey out and put it down into the bottom one.
Yeah.
And the other 2 I just took off.
Yeah.
Right? I just smoked them, brushed them, made sure there wasn't any larvae or anything in there, took them off. Took away that space.
And then, because you definitely want to manage the space. I set most of mine out and let them get robbed out, because mine were 9-frame honey supers that I specifically have set up as 9-frame honey supers. And I know you, if you're working 9-frame honey supers, you usually put them in tubs with CO2, don't you?
Yeah, I used to do that. I don't think I'm going to be doing that anymore. You get, unless they're totally dry, you get mold. And that mold will eat everything. It just spreads everywhere.
And plus there's a physical space association with the number of hives you're running that I didn't think was sustainable.
I went to a beekeeper's place, a big beekeeper, local guy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say his name, but I went to his place, and he has a metal barn shed full of his supers.
Yeah.
And he just stacks them on top. He has a board on the bottom.
Yep.
Stacks them on top of each other, and no board on top.
And
now they're all dry. They've all been cleaned out.
Yeah.
But no, and I'm like, well, do you have problems with mice? Do you have problems with wax moth? Do you have problems with anything? Nothing. All indoors now. And he runs, I think he's up to like 500 or 600 hives, something like that. So, yeah, but he's no issue whatsoever with that. So, I don't know. I like putting a board. I think this year I'm going to put a board on the bottom, board on top, so they're largely sealed. If the mice are going to get in, they're going to chew through the side anyway.
Yeah.
And see if I can't do it better that way. The containers, the tubs, I thought were really cool. You could organize them well, but mold is an issue with that process.
So going back to my previous note, Patreon is set up on the website / the podcast. So if you'd like to support the podcast, you can now go to Beekeeping Buddies on Patreon and find us there. And we don't have basic subscription set up, so I guess you can sign up for whatever level of support you feel that you want to provide. We're doing just fine as it is, but I know there's usually some people out there that appreciate the time and effort that goes into the podcast and the information they get out of it. And if you want to give back because you think that that's important, then that is now an option that you can do.
Yep. The other place, we've added another location where you can find the podcast as well. We're going to be adding it to the Beekeeping Buddies website, but it's also available on Riverview Road Apiary.com. I've got a blog section, and then I also have a podcast section. So we'll be spreading that around the web just so you can find it. Not just in one location.
I think last episode we talked about how you can now get us on Apple Podcasts. So if you have any friends that only listen to get their podcast there, then we're also available there. So let everybody know, and I'll look for anybody who wants to meet up at Hiveorama. Otherwise, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening, guys.